Welcome to Business Class, a podcast for people wanting to upgrade their thinking, upgrade their learning, and upgrade their life. I'm your host, Eugenia Panderhos, founder of Business Class Collective, best-selling author, and life coach. If you're an entrepreneur, a startup, or someone who dreams of reaching their full potential, then you're in the right place. You'll feel empowered and inspired to design the life you've always wanted. Let's do this. Hello beautiful people, and welcome back to the Business Class Collective and to this week's episode of Style Your Life. I'm so excited to be here with you today. This episode is about vulnerability, and I don't mean the vulnerability you may feel when you're walking down the street and might feel threatened by someone. I'm talking about the vulnerability of showing up in your life, of taking the chance, of believing in your dream, of bringing to fruition that you've been dreaming of and holding dear to your heart, and taking the risk in showing up for yourself. When we do this, we're actually open up to judgment and fear, and these two things can truly paralyze us. They can stop us in our steps and prevent us from attaining our life's goal and purpose. I'd like you to think about when you're doing something that you know is aligned with your soul's purpose and yet you have fear. It's that time that you need to sit and feel that fear, analyze the situation, and push through anyway. Bring your best self to your present project. Your future self will thank you for it. You'll wonder why you didn't start earlier. If it's something that really resonates with your soul, if it really is something that is so deep within you that only you truly recognize it, and that you know that your life will be different and more expanded when you pursue your goal, then it's an intimate journey between you and that goal. You'll have people in your life who may want to stop you in your tracks. They'll also bring that voice of fear into your mind. At that point again, reflect. You need to stop, reflect again, analyze, see how else you can do it, and push through. I remember that there's a couple of times in my life where I have felt vulnerable, and one was a personal matter when I invited friends to help me through a situation. I realised then that some people can really show up positively and that others can't. It was such a huge lesson to me, and at that time I kind of analysed what it was that I needed from someone and why I didn't have the courage at that time. Why did I feel so vulnerable that I felt that I couldn't move on from or through that situation? I remember reading a quote by Audrey Hepburn, and it goes something like this. Remember, if you ever need a helping hand, you'll find one at the end of each of your arms. As you grow older, you'll discover that you have two hands, one for helping yourself and one for helping others. I think that quote is so profound. It really does show that only we can show up for ourselves. Another time that I felt vulnerable was when I had written my first book. My first book was a Greek cultural cookbook. And it started off with the story of my family. It was an important book to bring forth, not just for my family and the future generations of our family, but as I learnt, for so many other people for whom Greek culture means something. I could not have imagined how impactful my book would be. But to get to that place, I had to write it, I had to sit with it, I had to edit it myself and have the best version available for the moment that I decided, what to do with it. And I remember that I was indecisive about what to do. At the time, I was also completing my Masters of Business Administration, and so I had a lot of competing demands. But life has a funny way of working out, and I was at a cafe on this one particular morning. I had finished Greek Life, that's the name of my book, and I was working on an MBA project. And the lady came past my table and sat at the table next to me. And a man approached her and they were discussing books. And at that moment, I thought, oh, wow, do I have the courage here after this man leaves to actually approach her and ask her if she's a publisher? I built up the courage and I faced my vulnerability of actually asking that question and approached her. She went on to explain that she was an editor, and in the process of my writing my book, that's exactly where I was up to. If I was going to pursue this any further, I needed an editor. So she promised that she would look at it, but didn't make any promises as to whether she would take on the job of editor. I gave her the manuscript on a USB, and we decided to meet 3 weeks later. During those 3 weeks, and giving the USB was a very vulnerable time for me. I felt so exposed. She was the first person that was reading my book outside my immediate family, and I remember thinking, what is she thinking? Is she enjoying it? Does she get the topic? And then what's going to happen if she doesn't like it? And so all these things were going through my mind, all these fears and all these feelings of vulnerability. We agreed to meet 3 weeks later at the same cafe, and she she sat opposite me and looked at me and then put her hands in prayer position. She was thrilled to accept the job of editing my book, and that just gave me the hope and courage to move forward with this project. It was through my editor that I met my graphic designer, and he helped bring my vision to fruition, and in the process came up with a beautiful design that truly matched my initial idea for the book. So I really felt that we resonated with one another. And then the next stage was to publish Greek Life as an ebook, and then source a printer to print the physical copies of the book. So the investment in the process itself, the investment in me as a person, and facing the vulnerabilities along the way. So there I was with these thousands of copies of books thinking, well, what do I do with them? And of course, I developed relationships with my stockists. I took the book physically into bookstores, and before I knew it, Greek Life was stocked in about 30 stores in Australia, and I had overseas orders for them, and people who had relatives overseas were taking multiple copies back to their families, or if people were visiting Australia, they would make sure that they would get copies from me for their families. So the word got out, and Greek Life was an absolute success with 2 print runs, all sold out in a very short period of time. And now my book is available on Amazon. But at each part of that process, I had to really dig deep, and I had to show up for myself and, address the vulnerability. Who was I to write Greek Life? Who was I to approach this lady in a cafe? And who was I to tell the story? And each step along the way, I had to back myself. I had to show up, and I had to have the courage and face my vulnerability. So for you people, today, if I can recommend one thing, if you believe in what you're doing, if you know that it's going to do you good and that you'll grow as a person, and this has been your dream, then analyze it. Do the maths. Think of a plan. Think about how you can make an impact, a beautiful and positive impact, not just in your life, but in the lives of others. I urge you to face your vulnerability and be the best version of yourself that you possibly can be. Your future self will thank you for it. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and I'll see you soon. You've been listening to Business Class, presented by Eugenia Panterhos, founder of Business Class Collective. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcast, subscribe, rate and review this podcast. Share the love and let your family and friends know too. You can follow Business Class Collective on Instagram and Facebook. Join me next time.